Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing our series of covering every weapon in the First Descendant, and I have some good news. We have found another standout weapon that is exceptionally good as we go into the Scout Rifles. Now, unfortunately, the other Scout Rifles, and this is all non-ultimate Scout Rifles, we'll look at Wave of Light and Blue Beetle and stuff like that later on in their own special cases, but there is one standout weapon in the Scout Rifles, and that is the Silly Weeper. If you build it for more weak point and critical damage with critical strike, it actually is exceptionally good and very, very strong in most situations, and is true with most of the Scout Rifles. You could run either Real Life Fighter or Sharp Precision Shot, though if you're perfectly accurate, Real Life Fighter will beat out Sharp Precision just barely, and this is the build that I would run for Silly Weeper, which puts it at about a simulated DPS of 751k, which does put it slightly above Eternal Willpower. It puts it in the realm of the likes of Assassin's Edge, Eternal Willpower, and Tamer for non-ultimate weapons. This is a very, very strong weapon. Now, it does require you to have high weak point accuracy, kind of like the Python. However, unlike the Python, it is actually quite easy to have high accuracy with this weapon because of the slow fire rate, the scope that's added on top of it, and the insane accuracy that it comes with. So if we look at this weapon by default, when you're scoped in, it actually has incredibly high accuracy. And the fire rate, if I hold down the button, it is fully auto, which means it can take advantage of Sharp Precision Shot. Any weapon that's semi-auto cannot, but this has the scaling there. But it's very easy to be consistently accurate with this. And one of the cool things about the Scout Rifles is they have very far effective range. So normally, just to give you an example, if the enemy's standing here, for handguns, your effective range starts falling off at about this distance, which means that every meter going backwards from here, for handguns, will start doing less and less damage. For like SMGs, it's about right here, so anything behind this. For rifles, like assault rifles and whatnot, or machine guns, it's about here. However, for the Silly Weeper, it's back here. It doesn't start losing damage. Like, this is full damage for the Silly Weeper, unlike most of their weapons, like Eternal Willpower, Tamer, even like the revolvers, hand cannons, handguns. They're all like almost at 30% of their total damage at this distance. But for Silly Weeper, that's not the case. This is still doing full damage here, and the fall off reaches a minimum of 60% at about over there. Like, it goes off the map. The range and accuracy for this weapon is ridiculous. There's not really any realistic distance that you won't be able to do respectable damage with, but you're up until here, you're doing full damage, which is nuts. But because unlike the other Scout Rifles, and we'll talk about them in a minute, like Sonic Co-op is your best non-Silly Weeper rifle. They are pretty fast shooting, they have high round counts, but the Silly Weeper is low round count, high damage, like very, very high damage, unupgraded and unboosted. It's a very strong weapon. So I think you can very easily take the Silly Weeper and you can place it in the same league as some of the other very good purple weapons. This one is going to be a very big pickup. What I would run on this, personally, if you have high weak point accuracy, I would still run Real Life Fighter here. It will outperform Sharp Precision Shot slightly, and I think that slightly is going to be worth it, especially since you're not losing the fire rate or changing fire rate, which means your accuracy can be very consistent. We're going to run action and reaction and rifling reinforcement because we always do. Those are just the best mods in the game for whatever reason until they decide to buff some of these other mods or change their group requirement system. Then we want to run with the element enhancement versus weakness. It's not going to be as good as some of the other ones. It's not as good as it is with some of the higher fire rate round weapons, but it is still great on this one because this weapon has a very high base firearm attack. And since this mod scales off of firearm attack, it's still going to be very useful. Then we want to reel with weak point damage and critical chance and critical strike damage as well. So for weak point, we're going to run weak point sight and have aiming. Both these scale really well with the Silly Weeper. Then we're going to run with target detection, better concentration for crit damage, and weak point on target detection, and crit chance with better insight. So all of that just puts the firearm attack for this weapon straight to the moon. It's crazy, high damage scaling, and then of course we have Real Life Fighter on top of it. But in case you wanted to swap this build out, if you wanted to have movement speed while aiming or things like that with Cole and Special Forces, or maybe you wanted to play around with like the very minimal recoil this weapon has, or the like very tiny minus accuracy that this has, you can swap that in. But this is the best build that you can run with Silly Weeper, and you want to start enhancing and catalyzing in the order listed on the left side of the screen. I still get questions on people asking what this is. This is just a weighting system that shows you how much value you'll get from each mod specifically, and so you want to enhance and analyze the mods that give the most value and then work your way down the list that way. But I give a big list here so that you can slot things in and out if you so choose to. Stat priority for this one is going to be firearm attack, elemental damage from fire attack, which the only source right now is elemental enhancement. Fire rate still does really well overall, but then your big gains are going to be from weak point, crit damage, crit chance, and reload. And because the rounds are so low on this weapon, rounds is your worst stat. You don't want to roll rounds. In fact, you'll notice right above my head that if you re-roll rounds on the Silly Weeper, it will give you 0 value. This is a bizarre phenomenon. If you don't know how this works, when you get maximum round increase, it always floors the value. It rounds down. So if you get 12.5 rounds from a modification, it'll round that down to 12 rounds in your magazine. Because this weapon is stock 8 rounds, if you have no other round bonuses and just a max roll golden rounds, you will still have 8 rounds in your weapon, which is a net gain of 0% on your weapon. So don't roll rounds on this. You want firearm attack, crit damage, weak point, and crit chance. Those would be your 4 best, and actually those are the ones I'm going to recommend. I would actually recommend, more so than most weapons, re-rolling this weapon until you get exactly these 4. Firearm attack, crit damage, weak point, and crit chance. Those are your best in slot. But if you could swap, like if you had to swap weak point or crit chance for bonus versus Colossi, that would be a fine swap. The elemental damage is not great, but it's okay. But those are your 4 best overall. So this is the Silly Weeper. This weapon is nuts, super strong, mega cracked, a nice difference there. But let's look at the rest of the scout rifles. Moving on to the general scout rifles, and these all have essentially the exact same weightings. Sonic Co-op is going to be the best of these. It has the highest scaling, the highest damage output, and the best. So if you wanted more of a high round, high rate of fire scout rifle, that's not quite as good on the top end as Silly Weeper, but it's not going to be as limited on forcing you to be accurate. Sonic Co-op is going to be your best choice there. But they all have essentially the exact same stat weighting and module weighting. For this, I would run rifling reinforcement, action and reaction, and sharp precision shot. Again, all of these rifles are full auto. Anything that's full auto, you can actually just hold down the trigger and you will stack sharp precision shot, which gives you more fire rate and firearm attack, and then you lose when you reload, which works great for these weapons. They have really nice kind of spot in. So if you wanted to run one of these, super nice, super fun, you can swap that in. And you'll run action and reaction, rifling reinforcement, sharp precision shot, and we're still going to run the elemental. But in this case, we're going to focus more on uptime of firing rather than the damage of each shot. So we're going to run fire rate up, expand weapon charge for more rounds, reload expert, better concentration, because some of these, especially Sonic Co-op, scale pretty decently with crit damage specifically, not crit chance, but crit damage. Reload expert, have aiming for weak point, because these are pretty precise. And then you have your weapon weighting, your module weightings on the left side here. Unfortunately, so if you look at the Silly Weeper, you'll notice that special sight and weak point expansion are 2 mods we don't see too much of, just because they have such horrible uptime. Firing Fiesta, weak point expansion, special sight, all of these have really fun effects, but the uptime is so abysmally low that you're not going to get any value out of it most of the time, unless you're just quick swapping to that weapon, firing a couple times, and quick swapping off. So you can certainly do that with Silly Weeper if you want, but for these, I don't think it's actually worth it to do that. So you're just not going to see it on this list. It's just not worth it. So generally getting recycle, like reload rounds are really good, and fire rate are really good on all of these scout rifles. And then you have the weightings in the top: firearm attack, bonus versus Colossi or a faction, crit damage, and flat elemental damage are going to be your best rolls. But it's not too bad to get rounds or weak point, because this one doesn't have the 0% that Silly Weeper does. Then for stat priority, you want firearm attack, fire rate, rounds, reload, crit damage is decent, weak point is okay, and crit chance is pretty bad on these weapons. And then from this, you can see that sharp precision shot is still very good. Honestly, for these, on the Silly Weeper, I do recommend running Real Life Fighter, because it's low shot count, low round count, easy to maintain. But for these, because they're such high rate of fire, I think Sharp Precision is a lot more fun and a lot more reliable as well. So I recommend running Sharp Precision here instead of Real Life Fighter. Then we want Action and Reaction, and then a whole bunch of reload, crit damage, rounds, bonuses, plus the Elemental. So this is going to be these weapons, General Scout. They're all basically the same. And then, of course, we'll be moving into the Ultimate Scout Rifles after that. But I wanted to at least highlight the Silly Weeper, which actually is another standout weapon that I don't see talked about too much. So hopefully you enjoyed. If you got value of it, let me know, and let me know what we should cover next down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.